phones, Babylons can't crack the code.
Northwestern football. They're not necessarily known as one of the powers of the Big Ten, especially for the sport of football. They're a Power 5 team, and they do not have the rich tradition to be a blue blood, and are not really known as one of the more dominant Power 5 teams, especially as a football program-wise. However, these past couple decades, especially when the Pat Fitzgerald era started, Northwestern football got a lot more consistent at making bowl games and having winning seasons, to say the least. Yes, they had their years where they missed bowl games here and there, but for the most part, they were on the better side of the winning records as opposed to the losing records. But the topic of today's video is not about necessarily Pat Fitzgerald or Northwestern as a football program history. Instead, it's about Northwestern football and their 2023 season. A team, you may say, had the biggest turnaround in all of college football. A team that came off a 1-11 season, had a lot of adversity right before the start of this year with their coach getting fired, a lot of investigations going on for hazing, yet with an interim head coach, they made it with a winning record and have a chance to win 8 games if they win the Las Vegas Bowl. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the turnaround of Northwestern football. Before I move on, remember to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's get into it. In the 2022 college football campaign, Northwestern was downright awful. They came off a 3-9 campaign the season prior, and were hoping to be a better team and try to push for bowl eligibility. However, that was not the case. They finished 1-11, had one of the worst offenses in all of college football, averaging nearly 14 points a game. Their scoring offense ranked 128th out of 131 teams, and their defense, even though it's generally been pretty good in the Pat Fitzgerald era, it was not good this season. Their scoring defense ranked 83rd, and they allowed 28 points a game, nearly double the amount of points that they were scoring. They did win one Big Ten game, their only win of the season, came against Nebraska, in a whole different country during week 0, in Ireland nonetheless. But once they got back to the States, Northwestern did not win a single game. They didn't win a single game after that first win versus Nebraska during week 0. They even lost a game to FCS, Southern Illinois, 24-31. Prior to the 23 season, there was a lot of word going on about Pat Fitzgerald and hazing going on with Northwestern, and this was all a couple months before the season was going to kick off. And nothing exactly happened immediately, but it didn't take long for something to happen, as Pat Fitzgerald, who's been a head coach there since 2006 and has been successful in his time at Northwestern, especially for it being Northwestern at that, he would end up getting fired due to these hazing claims and allegations and the investigation that was going to go on. So just weeks before the season to kick off, roughly about a month and a half, Northwestern is coming off a 1-11 season, and they lose their coach. They're picked to finish last in their own conference, and it doesn't seem like there's much hope for them to have a semblance of a good season in 2023, especially when they're going to have a first-year head coach and an interim be their head coach at that for an entire year. However, all those claims and predictions of them being the worst team in the Big Ten would not come true at all, as Northwestern in 2023 would end up being a 7-5 team in regular season play, finishing with a conference record of 5-4, being second in the Big Ten West standings. The offense still isn't the best. They averaged 22.8 points a game, which is 104th scoring in the nation, but the defense did improve to 53rd scoring defense, only allowing nearly 24 points a game. And yes, their season, they started off the year not looking like the best team. In week 1 of the 2023 college football season, Northwestern would lose to Big Ten foe Rutgers 7-24. It ultimately wasn't the most competitive game, and honestly, I remember watching it, and it wasn't necessarily the most entertaining game either, and Northwestern ultimately struggled to move the ball a lot. The defense wasn't terrible, but the offense, it seemed like if that was going to happen the rest of the year, they may be lucky to win 2 games. However, the next week, after they had that game versus Rutgers, they dominate UTEP 38-7, then lose to a top 25 Duke team 14-38. But now they get another chance at another Big Ten team. And what do? They beat Minnesota in a home game, 37-34. The rest of the season until about week 10, their 10th game of the season, mind that, it kind of switched off. They would win a game, then they would lose a game. They would win a game, and then they would lose a game. But they ultimately seemed like a much more competitive team, especially compared to the past couple seasons. Even notably, they beat Maryland in a home game 33-27. And after they lost their 9th game versus Iowa to fall to 4-5, they had to win at least 2 of their next 3 games versus Wisconsin, Purdue, and Illinois to make a bowl game. And what did they do to close out the season? They went on a 3-game winning streak. They beat Wisconsin on the road 24-10, beat Purdue at home 23-15, and their last game of the season at Illinois, they ended up beating them 45-43. And now they're going bowling, and they're going to be facing a Utah team in the Las Vegas Bowl, where they're going to have the opportunity to improve their record to 8-5 on the season. This would be their first season getting at minimum 8 wins since the 2018 collegiate season. Now I do want to note they probably could have won 8 games in 2020, but they only played 9 games and finished 7-2. That was a good year itself, as they finished in the top 25 of the college football playoff bowl. Well, that's beside the point. They haven't made a bowl game in a couple years. In their last 2 years as a program, they went 3-9 and 1-11. And I can say confidently that nobody really expected Northwestern to go to a bowl game this year, especially coming off that 1-11 season they just had, where they weren't anything on the offense side of the ball previously, and defensively they weren't terrible, but they also weren't the best team, as the offense could put them in bad situations a lot of the time. But this year, they won 7 games. They didn't just win 6 and barely make a bowl game. They ended up winning 7, and they have a chance to win 8 if they can beat Utah in the Las Vegas Bowl. This is a team that lost their head coach just weeks before the kickoff of their season. And now interim head coach David Braun is now going to be the head coach for Northwestern for the future, as he was just announced to be hired after making this bowl game and having this triumph of a season and this turnaround that they had. In my opinion, I believe this is the biggest one-season turnaround in college football from 2022 to 2023. And I understand you can make that argument for Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Mizzou, even Colorado to an extent, and that's just a few teams on the top of my head. But in my opinion, Northwestern, with what they faced right before the season happened, how bad that team was a season prior, it's really hard to believe that this team, they not only made it to a bowl game, but they won 7 games. If you would have asked me before the season, I would have thought this Northwestern team maybe would have won at most 3 games, if that. Despite all the negativity that was surrounding the program weeks leading up to the season, it seems like this season that they just had with David Braun could be a step in the right direction. Well guys, if you made it this far in today's video, drop something down in the comment section below. Who do you think had the biggest season turnaround in all of college football? And before you head out, remember to smash that like button, turn on those post notifications, and subscribe if you haven't already. B. Kelly out.